The amount of times that I filmed the introduction trying to get the perfect one, but I'm never going to get the perfect one. So I'm just going to leave this as the introduction and that's going to be it. So, hello and welcome to Managing Stress as a Teen. I'm your host, Jordan Coleman. I'm 17 years old. I'm a senior at high school. I do a lot, but of course, my mind goes blank trying to talk about me. So, we're going to talk about what this podcast is about. So this podcast is just basically about helping teens cope with stressors that occur during this stage of their lives, encouraging teens to focus on their mental health and how to identify triggers and formulate coping mechanisms. Throughout this series, I will introduce you to different experts and people that work with teens and young adults to get their professional experience and advice on how to help a teen deal with stress or how you as a teen can deal with stress. And I'll also bring my friends and peers on here and those podcasts are going to be chaotic, trust me. I already know it. But I'm going to bring, my mom is stomping hard upstairs. I hope you can hear that. But I'm going to bring them in here as well. I honestly hope that y'all can hear. I don't know what that sound is, but hopefully when I go through this, y'all do not hear it because it's definitely loud. It's like the heat or something is blowing. So usually you would only hear from me, or if I have my friends over, we'll probably be having a discussion. Most likely, it's probably going to be me and my friends having a discussion. But today, I actually have a interview. I have a guest coming on here, and I'm going to be asking her a couple of questions about stress in teens and how she deals with it. So today I have with me today Dr. Monifa B Mcknight. Dr. McKnight currently serves as an interim superintendent of schools for Montgomery County Public Schools, Maryland. Immediately prior to this role, she was Montgomery County's deputy superintendent. Dr. McKnight previously served Montgomery County as a director for secondary leadership development programs and as the principal of Ridgeview Middle School in Gaithersburg, Maryland, for which she was honored as the 2015 Maryland Middle School Principal of the Year. She also served as the Chief School Management and Instructional Leadership Officer for Howard County Public Schools, Maryland, and as a 2016 Campus Principal Ambassador Fellow for the United States Department of Education. I'm sorry if I'm messing up my words. I'm going to try to know right now. I can't speak that well, but we're going to get through this. Dr. McKnight holds a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from South Carolina State University in Orangeburg, South Carolina, a Master of Science degree in Educational Leadership from Bowie State University, Bowie, Maryland, and a Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership and Policy from the University of Maryland, College Park. I told you I was going to have y'all good people. Y'all heard all that?
Oh, Jordan, we're recording this.
Yes. It's only okay. You're only doing the audio though. I'm not doing your face. Only the audio.
I was going to say, Jordan, I got to put on lipstick, take my rubber bands out and all that, and we going to do video.
Only taking the audio from the video.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. So if you want to tell us about yourself and your profession.
Okay. So, Jordan, I will say that this is my 20th year serving as an educator in Montgomery County Public Schools. I came here 20 years ago in August of 2001, almost 2 years this August, but I came in as a teacher, a third-year teacher, and then moved into a English resource teacher position, staff development teacher, an administrator, principal, and then I became the district leader for training principals, which was the position name was secondary leadership of training and development. And so that was a really great opportunity. And I loved doing that because that was the first time I actually had an experience in which I'd be able to impact an entire system of administrators, teaching them what good leadership was about and how to make that leadership personalized to the needs of a school. While I was also serving as the secondary director of leadership development, I worked for the United States Department of Education. I served as a principal ambassador fellow. And when I did that, I worked under the Secretary of Education, John King, at the time. And that was a great experience because we were implementing equity plans across the nation and really working with school systems to focus on how they were bringing focuses of equity into their work, and so that they would ultimately be able to tell a story of how they were developing programs to help students who were not being successful in their school systems to a point of being successful. And that was a great opportunity to do that because we were able to bring the conversation to be really focused on students of color, students of different languages, and what were some barriers that were impeding the success of those students. And so it was really good to be able to do that work with different school systems across the nation. And then I went to Howard County Public Schools for 10 months, actually. I was there serving as the Chief of School Management and Instructional Leadership, and I then ran the office that was focused on principal supervisors, how they would work with principals. And so that was my primary job there. That was my first time leaving Montgomery County and going to another school system. I learned a lot, and it was also another great experience in which I was able to just learn how the work happens in a different district within Maryland, and a smaller district, because Montgomery County is a large district. We have over 160,000 students, and roughly 30,000 full-time and part-time employees. In Howard County, at the time when I was there, it was 77 schools. So
Yeah, it's just a unstable connection right now.
I have,
There we go.
okay, she's reminding us. So at that time, the superintendent invited me back, he and the Board of Education, because there was not a deputy superintendent role within Montgomery County Public Schools, and they thought that I had the skills, knowledge, and experience to be able to come back and focus the school system, and to also be someone who, you know, in addition to the superintendent, knew the system well. And because I professionally grew up in that system, I thought I would be able to make changes that the system was focused on making. So I came back, and then the year that I came back as the deputy superintendent, that was the same year that schools closed in March as a result of COVID-19. So, of course, life became very interesting then. But as a deputy superintendent, I tend to look at, you know, how you can coordinate a school system to get focused on what it needs to do. And when you're in a large system like Montgomery County, it's difficult because it's like trying to turn a cruise ship around, in which, if you can imagine that, you can't do it easily. And so when we experienced COVID-19, because I grew up professionally in the system, I knew the union leaders, I knew the staff, and so I was able to bring them together quickly and say, you know, we need to be able to stand up a virtual learning school for our students within 2 weeks, and we were able to accomplish that successfully. So we learned a lot from that, and here I am now. How many months in? 7 months into serving as the interim superintendent. A year and a week ago, Jack Smith, who brought me back as the deputy superintendent, announced that he was retiring. And so the Board of Education immediately asked me would I step in as interim superintendent until the board had made a decision about what they wanted to do and next leadership selection for the school system. So I agreed. And so I am now here serving as the interim superintendent in Montgomery County Public Schools.
Well, thank you very much. I told them in the introduction that I had a nice lady coming and speaking for it, because I had read like a little bit of your introduction, but you said a whole lot that wasn't in that introduction. So that was good.
Right. I mean, sometimes you can't write everything you do, but when I talk about it, Jordan, I do like to talk about it because, and remember this for yourself as you move through your journey, when you fulfill your passion of what it is that you like to do, it's important to do it because the obligation that you have, the job that you have, feels less like a job and more like a responsibility that you enjoy, a work of service. And had I not really enjoyed teaching, if I had not really enjoyed being a principal, I would not be sitting here as an interim superintendent. I mean, so it was through those experiences that I knew that I loved children, and anything that I could do to support them being successful in their lives and in their career, I wanted to do it. And every job has given me an opportunity to do that and pave that pathway. And while they have been different roles that I've served in, as long as I've stayed focused on how I found the space to do that, that's what makes the work enjoyable, even when it's hard. And that's why it's got to be something that you enjoy doing, because whatever career you choose, and definitely this in education, you got to love it, because there will be difficult days and hard days and things that happen. And you just have to have the will to fight through when you know why you're there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In your experience and opinion, what would you say are the main issues that affect teens?
The main issue that affects who?
Teens.
Teens?
Yes.
Well, right now, that's pretty easy, and it is social emotional wellness. Not that it wasn't always there before, but in school systems, the structure of how we do our work has primarily really been focused on teaching and learning, as it should be, because that's what education should be, and that's what we know, that education builds the path for a successful outcome for children. But as important as that is, every student has to be readily available and be well mentally to be able to be open to receive the teaching and learning and the instructional supports that are available. So, for years in education, we have looked at data and looked at performance data. And again, something that we should always do and we always must do. But now, given the fact that our suicide rates are through the roof, we know that our students have been isolated, many of them for over a year or even longer because of the conditions of COVID-19. They have not had the opportunity to socially interact, to build up their self-being and self-worth by being with their peers and learning things about themselves that they can't do by themselves, but they only get to from being around other people. I think about, as an educator, a lot of times, your work is to be able to look at a student and see strengths that they don't know that they have and tell them what their strengths are. And out of that, that's how we grow and develop leaders and students who have a passion about something that they just don't naturally see. So when you are not with others, with your peers, or with teachers and counselors and everybody who is supposed to represent a support system around a student, then you're not getting that feedback. And so right now we're in a space where students have been isolated for a long period of time. They were not particularly getting that feedback from adults that help them recognize strengths and things about themselves that they can't see by themselves. They were not able to be around their peers to just get to know themselves and who they are around their peers. They were not able to benefit from the day-to-day interaction that the educational structure depends on. And when all of that happens, then you just know and expect. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now with violence in schools, with suicide rates being up, with, fights and things like that. As students have come back into school this year, it is because of that long period of separation. So when I think about the biggest issue that's facing them right now, it is, how do they become socially and emotionally whole? Because they have just not had, they've gone through a long period of time that really didn't represent that collaboration, a network of support and interaction that every human being truly depends on. And then we're seeing the impact of that. So to me, that's the biggest issue and the biggest problem that we've got to solve. My opinion is that the school system alone can't do that. Now, the school system has a great responsibility in that, and that is that as much as we've spent time focusing on how we hire teachers and how we hire special education teachers and all those other positions, we now have to look at what are the positions that we need to have readily available as a regular structure within a school that provides that level of support for students' social and emotional needs. So that's more counselors, that's more social workers, that's
Okay, we lost her, but we're going to get her back. No. Yeah. It's just a conversation. Hello?
Jordan, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
Are
Someone
you fine?
called and it jumped off. It jumped out of Zoom. But I was saying that the school system has a responsibility because we have to look at other positions that have not traditionally been structured within a schoolhouse that families and students had to go to other networks to access, like social work, social workers, counselors, and all of those types of positions, more uh, social workers, more school psychologists, really focusing in on how those structures are just a regular part of the setup of a school so that we have enough of that support and that it's readily available to students. One other thing I'll say is that we have to do differently in the school system is a lot of times we've learned that our counselors spend much of their day working through college applications, making schedule changes, and are not available to speak to students about some of the really significant issues that they need to talk through. Yeah. So really, the school system also needs to look, we have to look at how the positions that were built and meant to support students' social and emotional needs are really being used in that way, and other responsibilities. And the third part of it is training the counselors to really know how to connect with students. If a student comes to a counselor and the conversation starts with, okay, before you tell me anything else, I'm going to need to tell your parent, that's going to be an immediate stop for that discussion of that student. And so, while, some of that becomes important, and in the context, depending on what the issue is, that's not the starting point. And so just retraining our counselors so that they actually can be the people who students feel comfortable having those conversations with is another part of it. So that's the school system's part, but everybody has a part in this. I think in communities that don't believe in counseling or believe that it's a negative, it has a negative tone to it and they don't engage in it, really spending the time to recognize that, no, this is a part of our society, and being able to talk through what issues are and not assuming that it has a negative connotation to it is something that our families have to work through. And I think community leaders have a responsibility in helping families recognize that, whether it may be faith-based leaders or other people who serve as credible messengers to families, to help encourage them to say, no, counseling is really a big part of what you have to do, and it shouldn't be anything that we automatically see as a negative. So those are some of my thoughts on that, Jordan.
I just wanted to add on about the counselor part. You were very right, because I know my counselors and like my other friends' counselors, during the pandemic, their grades kind of dropped, and the counselors weren't reaching out to the students saying, hey, your grades are dropping, you're failing this class, you've never failed this class before, or you've never failed a math class, and now you're failing now. And they're not reaching out to the kids and saying, well, what do you need and what's going on, and why are you failing the class, or why is your grade point average dropped from so significantly from this point on? And why, but they're not reaching out to the kids and asking them. And another thing you were saying about kids being stuck at home, like for a lot of like my peers and stuff, they had no motivation, because going to school was their motivation. If they don't do anything else, if they're not in clubs or anything, it was just going to school and going to see their friends at school. So I understood that a lot.
You gotta get you on the consultant bandwagon, Jordan. Well, that's why it's important to always listen to students too. I am also a leader who believes we just can't, in isolation, plan for what the students need. We got to hear from you all to know what's working and what's not, because sometimes when you just put adults together, and we may have experience and to put some of our best thinking together, but you all are the recipients of the services that we provide. And so if it's not working, you are the best people to tell us what's not working and what we need to change. And that has always been something that I pride myself on making the time for, which is spending time with students and getting their feedback about what's happening and how programs are or not working for them.
How do you think teens can manage their school life and personal life effectively?
So you actually just hit on one, Jordan. I think education is a lot of the learning that happens in the schoolhouse, but there's also a big educational component to exposure. When I say exposure, that means making a student a well-rounded individual by exposing them to different people, to different experiences, to different culture, to different um, just anything that represents something that they're to a certain extent limited to knowing because of their day to day. And so that's where the balance comes in, because I'm saying we know that is important to have, but you have to be able to have the time for both. And so when you get yourself, I think when you become involved in sports or these extracurricular activities, in some ways it forces you to figure out how you have to manage your time to do the both successfully. Now, does that mean that people automatically successfully do that when they involve themselves in extracurricular activities and are engaging in their studies? No, some people fail miserably at it, but or some students fail miserably at it. But that's where I'm saying, if the support structures are really set up in the way that they should be, example of what you were just talking about, technically no one should fail in that, because if someone's participating in extracurricular activities and then their studies are falling behind, then someone should see that, like a counselor, like a parent, and be able to quickly come to the aid of that student to figure out what is wrong that's getting in the way of them being able to balance that time. And so I think one is just as important as the other. And so sometimes getting into those activities forces you to figure out the balance. Now, with that said, I personally believe there are just some basic structures that help. And first one is a schedule. Now, I'm saying that from a Virgo, a true Virgo through and through. We are very structured people by nature, but I also think about like how I work with my son, who's 9 years old now. But I recognized early on, when I would write out the schedule, or when he would know what to expect, or he knew that he needed to manage his time for whatever it was, then he was able to successfully do that. And I just think scheduling time for the things that you need to do and want to do are important. So it starts with the schedule. And then also just kind of talking to I think peers should talk to other peers about different strategies that they put in place to help them balance their time. We're all different people. So what works for one may not automatically work for the other. But I think the more you talk to different people and figure out what are systems that they have set up that work for them, is something else that someone could try and see that it could possibly work for them. So I think that collaboration amongst peers to share best practices is also a really good strategy when you focus on a topic like, how do you manage your time? And then just not taking on too much. Knowing yourself is, I believe, the key also to having good time management, because if you know you're a procrastinator, then you always know, if you procrastinate, then how much can you take on, knowing that you're a person that naturally likes to wait to the last minute? If you know that you're a person who likes to get things early so that it doesn't feel like a burden towards closer to a deadline, then that means knowing what's expected of all of the responsibilities that you have up front helps you to better plan a schedule so that you can stay ahead. So the key to this is really knowing yourself. And I think that's important for teens and for students to know, but it truly is important for every adult to know too. As a leader of a large organization, I often find that one of the biggest blind spots for people that gets in the way of their success is not knowing themselves. Because if you don't know yourself well, if you don't know your strength and your weakness, especially when it comes down to things like prioritizing, time management skills, then those are things that can quickly get you into trouble if you don't know how you naturally work and how you have to set yourself up for success. So I think that's something that is a good, important focus for not only students and teens, but for adults as well.
Can you recommend any other resources or methods that will help young adults who may be struggling with depression or anxiety?
Yes, with depression and anxiety, there are a number of hotlines out there for young people that I say should always be utilized. Every school system has one. or should have one. We have them in Montgomery County. And I always say that's a good resource to use, because whether someone is struggling at 1 o'clock in the day, 9 o'clock at night, or 2 o'clock in the morning, access is what's really important. Because depending on how a person is struggling, whether they're just wanting to talk to someone or through a conflict that they had early in the day, or whether they're to the point of thinking about whether my life matters at this point or not, it's always about having access to someone or the service immediately. So those hotlines are a really good resource, because many of them are 24 hours. So it takes away that barrier of, is someone available to talk to me? So I think the hotline resources for social emotional support in school systems is a main one that I would recommend, again, just because of the time and accessibility of it. The other social emotional supports that I think are important are, and I can speak particularly for our system, we have a program called Be Well 365. And it essentially is a menu of services that we have available for students, for them to select from, the things that are most important to them for their self-care. So whether it is, exercise, or whether it is mindfulness, or if it is conflict resolution, whatever those things are that cause stress and anxiety, we believe that students need to have a roadmap of resources that are available to them based on the type of conflict that they're having. So that speaks to the flexibility of our Be Well 365. I also say mindfulness has really been one that I think has come full force in terms of people knowing that it's out there and that it's a reliable resource during the pandemic. Because during the pandemic, it just became a stress point for a lot of reasons for students and families overall. So mindfulness is also one that I strongly encourage for people who suffer from anxiety, because you get down to these little tips, or just kind of getting into a space in which you can get yourself centered, that makes the things that seem really important at one moment in time not so important. And sometimes that's just all it takes. The thing that's causing the stress or the anxiety, to remove yourself from focusing in on that, to focusing in on something calm and that brings you peace, just disrupts and interrupts that feeling of anxiety or stress at the moment that you have it. So mindfulness is the other resource that I think is really important, that just helps people to get centered and get them off the focus of the things that cause them stress and anxiety.
I'm glad you touched on mindfulness, because it's literally in my title of my podcast. Is mindfulness. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. I wonder why there hadn't been a group of teens to come up with, and maybe it is, and I just don't know about it. But again, I tend to think those who experience the challenges sometimes are the best at creating the solutions for it. I know we have a coding camp that we do in partnership with Apple in Montgomery County. And I love the coding camp because it allows students to be able to create an app that solves a problem within their community. And so I'm sitting on the side waiting, for when in the coding camp, someone's going to come up with this amazing app that is an app designed for elementary students, one for middle school students, and then one for high school students, that really get at the issues that they face around anxiety and stress management and just overall mental well-being. So I'm looking for that one, Jordan. Heck, it might be you after this project. I wouldn't be surprised.
I was like, okay, an app? Okay, let me write that down. Coding.
That's right, because that's entrepreneurship too. Right?
Yes, it is. Well, thank you so much. Those are all the questions that I had planned out. If there's anything else you would like to add, you can say it now. But that's everything I had planned out. You said a lot, though. I will say that. You said a lot.
Yeah, I tried to give you, a lot of information expanding beyond the questions. But just that, I think moving forward, we really have to live our lives like you all, your generation, are going to be the ones who solve a lot of the problems that were created as a result of the pandemic, because essentially you'll be recreating the future in a lot of ways. And we're definitely a big part of it, but you all are going to be a big part of continuing those plans and implementing it. So I just encourage you and, other Girl Scouts and just all of the students to just say, what is going to be my contribution to a problem that I see that we need to solve? And don't ever feel like you have to wait for the adults to do it. I mean, you all are always empowered and should always be empowered to get the resources that you need from us to say, what is it that I can do to solve problems that I'm passionate about? Because you have the skills and you have the experience to do it. So I just say always never second guess yourself and never wait for someone else to do something that you can do, because you can do much more sometimes than you think you can. And I know you have a family network, Jordan, that reminds you of that all the time. And so when you're with your peer groups and you have friends and colleagues who question, their own self-empowerment, you pour into them just like others pour into you. I believe that's very important for us to do that. And especially as young ladies and women of color, because we have a lot to offer this world, and we always have to think about what those gifts are and how we can contribute.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You are my first person, my first interviewee. So thank you so much.
Yay! I'm glad I could be the first, and I am so excited about your project, Jordan. And if there's anything that comes from it that you want me to do or support, you just let me know. I always want to support you beyond buying the Girl Scout cookies, which you always got me for that. Okay? You always got me for the cookies, Jordan. But always let me know if there's anything that I can do to support you as well. And I'm very proud of you for doing this project and doing something and being focused on service. I mean, as long as you've been a Girl Scout, this has been about service. So it's good to see you in that space, and don't ever leave that space, because we need you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Aunt Trace.
Hey y'all, so that was the end of episode 1. I hope y'all enjoyed it and you took a lot out from it. I know we touched on a lot, but I hope you really listened and got something out of it. After recording the episode, I was talking with my aunt, and we were talking about some of the things that Dr. Mcknight said. And one of the things that she said took away from her was isolation, and how as human beings we need to be connected. And by us not going to school and being away from friends and peers in which we've seen every single day, or at least we were in contact with teachers, anybody, like any day, to just not seeing nobody at all, it was unnatural for us. It was something that was natural that was now made unnatural. And not even at school, just anywhere, work, going to the store, going to the park, going to a practice, it doesn't matter. The gym, for whatever reason. Just doing all those things and just stopping and not having no interaction with anybody. And yes, you have the people in your house in which you see every single day, but that could also get tiring as well. So that was just another thing that we talked about, the isolation. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. I will see you all next time. And thanks for listening.